Hello, good after. Well, let's fix this screen. Good. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to LRVS Day 3, and everything's going great today. I'm happy to introduce Mr. Mike Holloway. He is president of Fifth Order Industry, and Mike's topic is going to be advanced employee training, applying advanced techniques for competency development. And as Mike has given his presentation, there will be, I'm going to fix this, excuse me. There will be, do your chats, I'll present them up to Mike and everything. And do not forget to check the code on the screen to participate in the LRVS Game Points Challenge. So I'm going to bring it up to Mike right now. And Mike, it is all yours.
Great. Awesome. Can you all hear me? I'm getting notification. Okay. There we go. All right. I just want to make sure that I can be heard. Can someone send over a chat just to say they can hear me? No? Okay. No, it sounds good. All right. Well, then we're going to get going. Sounds great. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the advancements in training. My name is Michael Holloway, and I've been doing training for, probably going on about, ever since college, essentially. So I'm not going to tell you how long that is, but it's been a while. So one thing I definitely like to do is try to improve upon everything that I get involved in. It can be kind of an obnoxious obsession, but it tends to work out pretty good. First and foremost, though, is a couple of questions. Anytime we go into any scenario, in terms of competency development or training, if you will, really I should ask some really basic questions. And it drives to say how much commitment is someone's going to willing to put into it. But do we want to have people that are well trained and skilled at their job? Obviously. Do we want a workplace culture that people want to be a part of? Well, obviously. When we spend money on training, do we want that training to be effective? Absolutely. And do we always get a good return on the time and money invested in training? Absolutely not. It doesn't happen. It's sad. It's disgusting, and it shouldn't occur, but it does. And the reason being is that I truly believe that we don't understand the very machine that we're trying to work on, which is the brain. We have to understand how that thing works. You wouldn't go breaking into an engine compartment without understanding some basics of mechanical design. You definitely don't want to start messing around with someone's brain if you don't understand how it works either. One of the reasons why training is so ineffective in so many different scenarios is that very fact. So we're going to try to tackle each one of these things and move forward. That being the case, how would you teach something like this? Let me know on chat. What do you all see here? What is this that I'm presenting right now? Anybody? What do you think? What is that, Sonia? Well, that's right there is subatomic particles. How is anybody? Well, first and foremost, it's all mathematical. It's very abstract. So it'd be very, very difficult to do if you didn't have a good understanding of math in general. Now, that being the case, we really do have to start drilling down, understanding reality and the basics for do something like this. But we really do know how the brain works. So Goethe wrote, the ancients said that animals are taught through their organs. And let me add to this, so are men, but they have the advantage of teaching their organs in return. Something that's very interesting with this particular passage, when we learn, our very DNA changes. A lot of folks never really realized it, but your DNA changes on a very, very quick and routine basis. But there's some serious scientific investigation and proof that, in fact, when you learn things, your DNA does change for lots of different reasons. It makes sense for an advancement. So if that is the case, then we have to be really careful about what we do and how we go about doing it, especially establishing habits, because sometimes these habits are very difficult to break. Now, here's a particular graph that many of you may have never seen. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And here, in the field of psychology, this particular cognitive bias, where people of low ability have an illusionary superiority, mistakenly assessing their cognitive ability as greater than it is. So essentially, what that means is that folks believe they know more than they do early on until they go through a certain amount of experience. And then they realize they really don't have as much of the mental chops as they thought they had until they really start going through a much lengthy experience basis. And then they start developing the confidence back again. But it's true confidence, not false confidence. That's where we got to get to. We have to start building on that experience, but we also have to reduce the false confidence. Now, in terms of what we call the cone of learning, and this was developed back in '69 by Edgar Dale. It's kind of a cool little graphic. So after we go through about 2 weeks of training or whatever, learning, if you will, you really only remember about 10% of what you read, about 20 from what you hear, and maybe 30% of what you actually saw. But if we keep on going down and try to figure out how can we retain, have a greater degree of retention, well, going into, say, watching movies and exhibiting and watching a demonstration for sure, and then participating in a discussion, giving a talk even more so, but really doing a dramatic presentation, simulating a real experience, doing the real thing is where the real learning takes place. Now, that's not always going to be easy in a classroom environment, but we figured out how to go about doing that. So when we talk about learning modalities and how we can actually go about figuring how different people learn, well, there's a lot of different ways. Mechanics and technicians, well, they're typically physical learners, call them kinetic learners. Verbal learners, well, sometimes those are the folks who like to write and what have you and give speeches. Then there's oral learners. They learn by sound. Visual learners definitely learn by images and colors, and logical learners read by reason. Social learners, well, they learn by group setting. And then there are always those solitary learners, those self-study folks. So imagine being able to develop a whole training technique based upon people's learning modalities. Well, it's essentially exactly what we've done. It means a lot more work. It means that we've actually had to build a lot more courses designed specifically for learning styles, but that's okay. We want to have a high degree of competency. Now, how would you go about teaching something like this? Anybody? That right there is a transmission. Not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to teach about, because quite frankly, unless you actually saw it running, you wouldn't get a very good understanding of what's happening. But if you went position by position and shift by shift, you could start getting an understanding of exactly where the engagements of the gears are and where they're not. That becomes a little bit more effective. But really, probably a very simple way to teach something along this line is to actually have the gearbox running, and we could actually see the movement from gear set to gear set. Then we could actually see what's going on. Another way, obviously, would be even better for those who are mechanically inclined is to tear it apart and rebuild it. Then you have a really good understanding. But truly, the best way to go about something like this is to try to teach somebody else. Now, going back to the same question, how would we go about teaching this? We first and foremost have to understand someone's learning modality. How is it they actually are learning? And sometimes it's not going to be as easy as you think, but what we've been able to do is work with a few different universities and buckle it down to try to understand exactly what the learning modalities are. In many cases, folks are a composite. They're a combination of several different things. But what we're going to try to do is really understand what your majority learning modality is and really start to focus in on that. Is it logical? Is it auditory? Is it visual? Is it kinetic? And then start building the case around that. One of the greatest things that we have as human beings is our ability to communicate. And that comes in handy. It's allowed us to become exceptionally successful in terms of being an apex predator and basically rulers of this little orb we tend to live on for the next couple thousand years until things change, or maybe even less than that. But anyway, one of the things is all about what we call knowledge management. How are we going to take about all the stuff that we learn and go forward with it? Well, if you think about this in terms of companies and businesses, a lot of times these things are discovered, they're put away in binders and filing cabinets and boxes. Maybe they go into various types of computer systems, legacy accounts, enterprise accounts, team folders and things like that, shared via emails and text messages. But all this stuff is actually captured in employees' minds. And the sad thing is that what are we doing with this knowledge, with this information? And quite frankly, a lot of times, nothing, unfortunately. It's lost. All this great stuff can be lost, and especially when people leave. Very difficult. We have to figure out how to take it to the next level in terms of developing competency. A lot of times we experience what is called siloed information, where all these great things that we learn are kept in different departments and different offices and what have you. Now, many are working from home. There's a lot of less personal interactions. That reduces the amount of knowledge sharing. Different locations. Sometimes there's consolidation. There's also a knowledge sharing. It's a must. It requires employee buy-in. We have to make it easy. We've got to make it simple as well as useful. And that's always been the big challenge. Now, traditional knowledge management fails because of several different reasons. One in particular is what we call information hoarding. That doesn't get the corporation going in the right direction at all. A lot of times people like to keep their secrets and their things to themselves, different departments and what have you. That's very discouraging, unfortunately. Then we have obviously knowledge silos, and then coming back into tribal and tacit knowledge. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And knowledge loss. Now, in terms of knowledge silos, Fortune 500 companies reportedly lose about $31 billion per year failing to share knowledge across teams. That's a huge number. That's a big number. And I know throughout the particular conference here, we've talked about the concept of reliability and how much it can actually save operations and companies money. Well, this is the same type of thing, where reliability, unless it's shared, it's almost useless. So all the great things that are discovered never actually get implemented across the board and for the future generations of the business. Now, in terms of tacit or tribal knowledge, that's a type of knowledge that's more difficult to articulate than explicit knowledge per se. It's a little bit more complex, but there is a way to get around that and bring about the tacit and tribal knowledge into the mainstream of the corporation or the group or the class or whatever like that. And it really does have to do with being able to discern and decipher the subject matter, the qualifiers, and coming back in to see exactly how it is we're getting to the point. Let's see here. Right over here, in terms of knowledge loss, employees change jobs on average about 12 times over the course of their careers, probably even more so with some of the younger ones out there. What's interesting, though, is that now that folks are trying to develop a little more of their maybe the 401ks, they're retiring early, maybe changing complete professions and jobs per se. That's actually it's great personally, but unfortunately corporations suffer due to the knowledge loss. So how can we go capture the stuff that's done on a daily basis and not only necessarily have knowledge sharing, but also have a useful process in which we could go about taking advantage of that? Well, there's ways to do it. I want to share with you. Now, some stats, because I love statistics. All goes that the folks out there that actually worked with me and know me, like I'm a numbers guy. I just dig it. There's a thing that says numbers don't lie, but liars use numbers. But really, if you do it right, numbers can really bring you to a good understanding of things. But here's one of the things. So As far as knowledge loss goes, workers between 25 and 34 change jobs every couple of years. 96 million of us baby boomers on the verge of retiring. Well, actually, I'm not. I probably will never retire, but there are a lot out there that do. And then 51% of those employees say that they're considering making a switch to a new job rather quickly. So therefore, what happens with all the stuff that everybody does? It's lost. Unfortunately, we can't lose it. We got to capture it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So how do we incorporate data into an LMS? And that's exactly what we're going to do. All that awesome stuff that people do, why not turning into a learning lesson? Not a full-blown college course or anything like that, but micro bursts, small learning modalities that can actually bring about better enlightenment. And what we're going to see is an improved productivity. We're going to have improved morale, successful knowledge transfer, and even greater connectivity. We'll explore a little bit of that. Improved productivity. There's absolutely a complete understanding of when things are done and things are succeeded, that productivity improves. We have to go about figuring out how to do that. And the best way to do that is to train someone and make them accountable. That's an idea. Now, one thing is for certain, folks who go through a good comprehensive training program and actually accomplish something have a higher degree of morale. And if there's a high degree of morale in a corporation, it's going to succeed. So what we have to do is establish a good, successful knowledge transfer going forward to where not only do the stuff that folks do that's positive is captured, but also even some of the mistakes. There's also retribution and fear that people are going to suffer due to a mistake they make. But really, quite frankly, in a good environment, if a failure occurs, we take advantage of that insight and look to correct it. We don't punish it. We just understand, recognize it, and go about something else. And then obviously having a greater connectivity through the whole concept of data sharing and knowledge sharing is what we're going to actually explore as well. Now, improved employee morale. One cannot deny that actually brings about greater productivity. Anytime we've accomplished anything, it always works. And it works to make folks feel better. Now, how do we go about doing something like this? Well, first and foremost, you got to go out there and understand where you're at. Take a baseline. Anytime we do anything in science and engineering, we establish a baseline. And a baseline really means how we want to go about performing and understand how to improve. We got to do an audit. We have to take a baseline exam, if you will. And then from there, we have to go and document exactly what we understand and don't understand. Because audits are going to bring about a deficiency, which is good, but we have to write this stuff down. And then we're going to have to choose a technology. Now, we build online learning management systems. We also build virtual courses that one can take, just like today. But we also go on site and work as well. It depends upon what kind of technology one wants to do. But furthermore, though, is that it's just one thing to be able to go in and teach somebody something. But we want to capture the intelligence and actually have it utilized going forward for the future. And then lastly, how are we going to make that kind of thing searchable and usable for the organization? We're going to have to go about doing that as well, which is all part of the process. And performing that audit, well, understanding the resources that exist in a company, where those resources are stored and so forth, and what knowledge gaps currently exist, how information is currently shared, and what obstacles are preventing your knowledge from being shared as well. So all these different things have to come into a pretty comprehensive understanding. Now, mind you, this isn't just for operations or maintenance or reliability. We do this with everything from research and development on through to HR, from safety and industrial hygiene. Gosh, there's probably no facet of industry we don't get involved in anymore. We cut our teeth years ago into lubrication technology and certification preparations, but now we've evolved into something more. We're a training company. We train trainers. We develop companies to do this kind of thing as well. A lot of companies don't do that, but we do. It's kind of an interesting thing. Folks have always said, aren't you establishing competition? No, there's nobody out there that builds companies. It just isn't. We build companies to do exactly what we do, which is, on the front face, a little bit absurd. But is it really? Is it really absurd? Think about that. Think about the long game. That's what we do. So, documentation, we got to understand who the end users are, what information they need, who these people are communicating with, and what kind of technology is best suited for their environment. What information silos currently exist, and to try to either Well, we don't want to break the silos down. They exist for a reason. But how about if we'd establish a little bit more capillary action between these silos so the organs could actually speak to each other instead of working alone? And what process for sharing knowledge is done now, and how does it get improved upon? We go about creating content, legit creators of knowledge managers. That's who we got to have to work with and become. And then obviously then what processes are we going to use to retain the knowledge when employees leave? Well, there's a good data bank of info. That's what we have to go about doing. And that's what has to be done. That's what is going to be done. So going about the technology, we always say it's got to be smart. There's plenty of books written on smart, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's a nice little acronym, but it makes sense. It only makes sense if you speak English, I suppose, because I guess that acronym probably wouldn't work in a different language. But there's the magic of English, right? But anyway, it sure does make sense, and that's kind of like a check-off box list right there. And then to capture that intelligence, working on a daily basis. Now, that's not always going to be easy, but we figured out a compatibilization intelligent program that can actually do this, to capture that intel and make it searchable. And how to go about doing that is we're going to receive data from all different types of sources, maintenance CMMSs, process production reports, all the way down to staff reports and emails and everything in between. Now, sometimes there's firewalls, and other times there's lots of confidential information. We have some pretty strict NDAs in place that we essentially become part of your company. So we want to be seamless, but we also respect the fact that there's some sensitive stuff, and sometimes companies just don't have the ability to allow our software to speak to their software, and we respect that. There's always workarounds. In our organization, every problem has a solution. It just depends upon how much energy you're willing to put into that solution. We've figured out all different types of solutions around this, but like I said, there's a lot of intel out there, and we want to be able to take full advantage of it, from human resources to accounting, to analysis laboratories, outside services, quality control and assurance, purchasing and procurement, even safety. There's no stone that's going to be left unturned. Like I said, we're going to be part of the organization to bring you forward to a whole other level of productivity and reliability. And that's really what we want to achieve. And then make it searchable and usable. We're going to be able to go in there and establish a baseline competency that's developed, and then data is useful, and build more microclasses lasting anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes each, let's say. It's a subscription basis. Going in there and actually figuring out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis all the great things it's done, and having your folks accountable to learn these things and make it learnable. Not only make it teachable, learnable, but also accountable too. And obviously, we're not going to do anything unless we have some sort of return on investment. And that means that it could be a hard ROI or a soft ROI. And if it's hard, we're going to be reducing the average time it takes employees to find information for sure and utilize it and become effective. And the soft stuff is increasing employees' confidence in the information they're using. That's also measurable, but it's a little bit more difficult in certain aspects. But we've figured out a way to do that as well. So it's the adaptation. Obviously, we're going to speak real quick about the engagement, and then obviously we're targeting the performance. So here, gauging the employee buy-in rate is really important. A lot of times we could put all kinds of programs together, but unless they're followed through and adopted, they're useless. So understanding what the percentage of employees using this technology management is, we can obviously easily track that and measure by looking at their platform logins all the way down to drilling down to what they've actually learned and utilized by our assessments on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And that's important. Obviously, going involved in engagement and performance will be the next levels. And engagement, how many times they actually use it, share it, like it, comment on it, number of views, posts, number of questions asked and answered. And that's one of the things, is that if we provide content in a understandable manner to where they can actually utilize it, we got to understand, are they actually understanding it and using it? And that's an important aspect. So it all is really does focus on figuring out how they are engaged. And then performance. We're going to track the goals, KPIs. We love KPIs. Measurables. They got metrics and rates. KPIs are awesome. But we're going to actually track these goals set for the department, the person going forward. And whatever track they choose, we got to keep track of it. It's important. And then finally, performance. Here, the employee time spent searching for information in terms of what they do to actually solve problems maybe understand for various repetitive tasks, and average time spent team to resolve maybe even customer issues. And we do this in marketing and sales organizations as well.
Hey, Mike, we really got to wrap this up, buddy. We're at the end of the time slot.
Well, good, because guess what? We are in conclusion.
Awesome.
We are there. The idea to do good and be better.
Okay, Mike, just remember, everybody, you guys know how to get in touch with Mike at Fifth Order Industry, all the contact information and through the app. And also this is going to be part of the library. Mike, you're awesome. You're a veteran here. We appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, take care, Mike. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.